Hello and welcome to the DRS Zone podcast. My name is Ed White. I do this alongside my 14-year-old son, Sam, who is an F1 fanatic, sports fanatic, in fact. Now, we know it's been a while. We've got good excuses, and we're not going to dwell on them for too long, but we just want to let you know why we haven't had a podcast for a while, and we do apologize for it. I was in the States pretty much for the entire month of December and part of November covering the World Cup, so I didn't have a lot of time on my hands. You, Sam, welcome back. You had a few things going as well.
I did indeed. I was finishing up school, and then when that finished, I had a 3-day camp to deal with, and then after that, got braces on. So
You did.
it's been a very busy last month,
It
which has been
has.
2 years. So it is a new year, it's a new season, and we are ready for
Yeah,
2023.
we are. We're very excited about that. And of course, we did have Christmas and New Year's as well too. And we should say that if your voice sounds a tiny bit different, it might be because of the braces, but you're doing a really good job of sort of
Thank you.
adapting to those as well. So just keep that in mind.
Thank
What
you.
what we're going to do is run through each of the 10 teams very quickly, just sort of kind of a borderline recap, looking ahead, and just sort of any sort of news and throw in a few opinions as well. So we'll go in order of how the teams finished in the constructors championship last year. And we'll start with Red Bull, of course, second title in a row, both for the team and for Max Verstappen. So a pretty good year, really, Sam, for them.
Yep, sadly, it was a really good year. For Red Bull, they kind of seemed unstoppable after Ferrari. I mean, we kind of gifted them the championship, but there were a few moments where you were just like, yeah, it's over now.
Yeah.
France being the biggest one, France. Although after that, because in Austria, of course, Ferrari got a win, thought it was back on. France, they crashed out. Red Bull. That was when I knew they'd won the championship. So it is two in a row for them.
Yep.
And for Max Verstappen, one thing though to worry about for Red Bull is the salary cap penalty that reduces their time with their new car, which could benefit Ferrari and Mercedes and even some of the other teams.
Yep. That's a really good point. That would be the one negative. Um, and the other thing to mention too is that the Ricardo saga finally came to an end. We weren't sure where he was. It was the biggest news in Australia. Like every day you'd read a new story about him. He's going
Yep.
back to Red Bull as a reserve driver.
Yeah, I don't know how good that is. I mean, it's sadly I don't want to say it, but I think this is the end of a career decision because you just don't see many
Mm,
fill-in races at Red Bull where you see it at Haas or Alfa Romeo or
yep.
Williams. You see a lot of times, like as we saw Nick De Vries take Alex Albon's place, we're seeing a lot of drivers come in and take over some of the smaller teams' seats. Have not really seen that much with Ferrari, Red Bull, so I don't think he'll be getting much time other than the occasional practice session. So I do think this is slowing down for Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree with you. At least it keeps him around and keeps him around the circuit, and we'll get the that
Yeah,
energy
we'll
and
get to see
entertainment.
him.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we love.
He'll be
Uh,
interviewed.
what
Yeah,
about a goal for these guys? You got a 2023 goal for Red Bull?
it's probably the three-peat. I mean, you
Yep.
love to go back to back to back after Mercedes had dominated for so long. Red Bull did win those four in a row with Sebastian Vettel, but after that, Mercedes were on a roll 2014 until 2020. And then Red Bull, if they can get three here, I think they'll be really up there as one of the best teams of the 2000s with Mercedes and Ferrari.
Yep, I think that's really good. Speaking of Ferrari, let's move on to them. I'll let you handle most of this because you are a Ferrari fan. But after all the drama and anguish of last year, Charles Leclerc did finish second in the driver standings. So that is
Yeah,
a positive.
it is. I mean, worked hard in that last race, was pretty intense. That last lap, Sergio Perez was catching him.
Yeah.
But we managed to hold off. We did get second in the constructors and in the drivers, which is all right considering all the DNFs and mistakes we had. And we do have a team change, not a driver. We've still got Leclerc and Sainz, but Mattia Binotto gets the flick. And Alfa Romeo team principal Frederic Vasseur has joined the team as team principal. I like that. I do like that. The Frenchman, I believe he
Yes.
is joining a Monegasque and a Spaniard for 2023.
It's interesting, isn't it? But Bernardo took a lot of heat last year, the strategy situation. He always seemed like a pretty cool customer, like it never really got to him that much. But I do think this is a necessary change.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think this is a good move for Ferrari going into 2023. And I had written down a goal for Ferrari, Sam, and I think it goes hand in hand with Vasseur coming in and Bernardo leaving. Don't let strategy beat you. Okay. You might have
Yes,
a
I
slower
know.
car.
I know.
You might have
Yeah.
some driver mistakes. You might have some bad luck, but don't let foolish strategy beat you like it did often the last couple of years.
Yeah. Now, one thing I will say is Mattia Binotto got a lot of heat, but and he's getting replaced. I don't see any strategists being replaced. We
Mm,
need we need changes in the engine room. We need changes with the strategists because that's where the strategy comes from.
I think that's
But
a really good
anyway,
point.
it's
Yep.
a fresh start. Towards Vassio, I've been a fan of his for a while. So yeah, I think he'll do all right for
I think it's a
Ferrari.
good move. I agree. Move on to Mercedes. Should mention the top three teams. There were no changes in the driver,
The
no driver
drivers.
changes in
Mm.
the top three. So Mercedes goes at it again with Toto Wolff in charge, Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. Really an up and down, strange,
Yeah,
emotional year for
really
Mercedes.
weird. Really weird. Started off in testing and even
Mm,
well, testing was a disaster. For everyone. Like a lot of cars struggle, but Mercedes were the one where you think, okay, they're in trouble. This is not where they should be coming off the constructors the year before.
yep.
And even though Red Bull had the double DNF in Bahrain, and Mercedes did take a 3-4 finish, which was very good. It went downhill from there, a bit of a disaster. And then you had occasional race weekends where they'd pop up with a double podium, and later on it got better to the point where they had a win in Sao Paulo in the sprint and in the race, and George Russell takes his first win. And then in Abu Dhabi, it seems like they're back to day one with the first mechanical DNF of the season for Lewis Hamilton. So it was just really up and down, as you said. You could never really predict him. That's why I got all my predictions wrong last year. That's why. That's
No,
why.
you're absolutely right. And this offseason will be huge for them. Of course, you didn't even mention the porpoising thing, which is a
Oh, of
massive
course. I
issue early
forgot about the
on.
porpoising. That
Yeah, so
thing was
they're going to have to take care of
ages
that.
ago.
The one positive I thought that came out of it in a weird way, not for them, but for us as viewers, was that we got a very open, honest Toto Wolff. Like he wasn't playing any games. He completely, I felt, whenever he was interviewed, gave a really honest answer. You know, we gave Lewis a terrible car, those kind of things, where he was very open and entertaining. From a viewer standpoint, that doesn't help you from Mercedes fan or part of the team. And this is also my 2023 goal for them is a competitive car from day one. So a competitive car
Yeah,
over the season that will last them throughout the season, won't kind of disappear and come back. They want a consistent competitive
yeah.
car from day one. That's my
I agree with that.
goal for Mercedes.
I agree with that.
Alpine is next, finished fourth. Um,
Yes, our
and there
first
are some
driver
changes
change.
here. Yes, fill
Yes,
us
it
in.
is. So Fernando Alonso has moved on to another team. We will talk about that later. But it is AlphaTauri's Pierre Gasly, which has been rumored for him to go to Alpine for years now. It's finally happened. The Frenchman is at a French team with a French teammate, although they don't get along, as they say. Now, I find this hard to believe. Apparently they grew up only a town or two apart. So if I become an F1 driver and there's someone a couple streets away who's is also an F1 driver on my team, I think I would know them before I get there. And B, you gotta be friends. You grew up basically together. Now, I don't know how true these rumors are. They might not be true. But if so, I hope that that doesn't get in the way of Alpine's team because they have been a very structured team. We saw
Yep.
fourth in the championship last year, so hopefully they can work together for a good result.
Who's the number one driver?
Ocon, I think. Even they've both had a race victory
Mm.
in an unlikely circumstance. Italy in 2020 for Gasly and Hungary 2021 for Ocon. I think Ocon has been there since 2020.
Yep.
Gasly's a newcomer. He
Yep.
didn't have the best season last time.
Yep.
So I
I'll
think
agree with you.
Ocon's got to be
Yep.
number one.
I agree with that. You got a goal for
Gasly's
them?
competitive.
Got a goal for Alpine?
Probably to finish fourth again, I'd say.
Yep. I think that's great. I think that's fair. I think they're pretty
Yep.
solid last year, and a lot of bad
Yeah.
luck in the races too. To be honest,
Yeah.
I don't.
They had a great battle with McLaren.
Yeah, absolutely, and that brings us to McLaren. They ended up finishing fifth. Had a, I wouldn't say a rough year, inconsistent year.
Yeah.
Norris was pretty good for most of the year. Ricardo
Yeah.
was not very good for most of the year, but some big changes here as well too.
Yeah. The weird thing is that just before we talk about the changes, I feel like Daniel Ricciardo, yes, didn't have a great season. It showed. I feel like Ocon and Alonso had much better results than Norris, but somehow Norris was miles ahead in the best of the rest championship. It made no sense. He finished second by quite some margin, and it seemed like most races he was either eighth or ninth or not in the points at all. So that made no sense to me to consistently see him picking up the points. But yes, Oscar Piastri, the Alpine driver, now a McLaren driver. Bit of a disaster when that was first announced.
It was a soap opera, no doubt about it.
It was, but a fellow Aussie. He grew up not too far away from here. Played his school in soccer a couple of times. Yeah, so it'll be fun to have an Australian driver with an Australian Grand Prix with an Australian driver.
Yep.
It's not Daniel Ricciardo. It is in a McLaren. It's Oscar Piastri, and Lando Norris still has an Australian teammate.
Yep. And there's a change at the top as well too, with Andreas Seidel moving on and
Yes, and
Andrea
Andrea
Stella
Stella.
replacing him.
Yes, he's been at the team for a while, and he finally gets the big call up.
Yeah, so this is a big year for them. Let's be honest. I think coming into the Australian Grand Prix, there was a lot of hype last year, especially because of Daniel Ricciardo, and there was a lot of McLaren
Yeah.
merchandise and a lot of people
Oh, there was
excited about
so
it.
much.
Remember that? So it's going to be the same thing with
Yes.
Piastri. So I think the early stages are going to be very important here for McLaren and for Piastri, and there'll be a lot of pressure on. There really will be a lot of pressure on Piastri. Backing, replacing Ricardo and also racing for a pretty high profile team. What a goal for them, I think, would be the same as Alpine, right? You're in the same hunt. You want to finish fourth. Obviously, if you could
Yep.
finish third or higher, that you would, but realistically, you're
No,
looking at
that's fair.
probably battling for fourth.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair.
all right, let's move on to the bottom five from last year. Alfa Romeo.
Alfa
Uh,
Romeo, yes.
Same drivers, but they do not have a team principal yet, still to be
Yes,
announced.
because Fred Vasseur has gone to Ferrari, obviously. But something interesting, Alfa Romeo, the only team outside of the top three teams that has retained the same driver pair,
Mm,
Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu. Valtteri
yep.
Bottas had a great start to the season last year with Alfa Romeo. Great opening race in Bahrain and in Imola too. And his finish in Imola was the reason why Alfa Romeo finished ahead of Aston Martin because they were even on points, but Bottas had the best result of all four of those drivers. Zhou Guanyu, now I think he's done an incredible job. His first season, he's been flipped upside down in a crash that I've never seen anything like.
Yeah.
I doubt you might have seen something like it, but it was quite extraordinary
Oh,
how
it was.
in
Agree.
only his first, I don't even know if it was his first 10 races, and that happens. He finished in the points fair few times. Q3 appearances, no surprise for him. Really good performance, really good rookie performance, and points on his debut. I said he'd do well. I think he did pretty well.
Yep, I agree. And Bottas, meanwhile, with his new Australian partner, Tiffany Cromwell, has been all over our Instagram feed. It's basically a tour of Australia. Him pick up his Instagram one day, he's on the Great Ocean Road. The next day, he's in the mountains. He's everywhere. He's just
He's got a
basically
mullet.
He's got he should be getting a gig with the Australian Tourism Board because he's absolutely everywhere,
I'm
which is
surprised
great
we
to
haven't
see.
seen him.
Well, yeah, we haven't seen him here where we are, but
I've got a wallpaper on my phone ready to click for Valtteri Bottas in case I see him and say, look, I'm a huge fan. Because I think I'm gonna see him wherever I go.
he's
He's all
he's
over the country.
he's kind of become the honorable Aussie now, like we've seen in the
Yeah,
past with uh Kim Kleisters in the tennis and a few other people. Goal for Alfa Romeo for 2023. What do you think?
I think a top 5 finish, I
Yep.
think.
Yeah, go one better than they did last year. Yep, I think that's a
Yeah.
great call. Yeah, finish
Yeah, that
fifth or
would be
sixth. Yeah.
very
Yep.
very encouraging for Alfa Romeo who have been considered back markers in 2020 and sort of
Yeah.
2021. So it was a step forward this year. The Ferrari engines we saw because it was similar with Haas.
Yep, I agree with that. Aston Martin finished seventh last year. Another team with changes.
Yes. So Mike Crack is still the team principal.
Crack is back.
Lance Crack is back.
Sorry,
Lance
had
Stroll
to.
is still there.
Yes.
His father got rid of a 4-time world champion. Lance Stroll thinks he can be the number one person on his team. His father hires a 2-time world champion in Fernando Alonso,
Thanks,
who
Dad.
has gone to Aston Martin. Yes, and Alonso and Stroll had a crash in the US Grand Prix. I wonder, Lance Stroll could be the number one driver just because his dad owns a team. I kind of hope we see a Fernando number one driver. He's been around for so long.
That's an
He's such a
interesting one.
good
Yeah,
driver.
that's a really
He's
good point you bring up because let's be honest, I think Alonso's in to help Lance Stroll. Obviously, he brings a lot more to the team and all that, but I think he's also there to sort of help Stroll.
yeah,
Does it benefit having Alonso as your number one driver? He probably is because I don't think you can make him two, knowing his personality and knowing the
yeah,
way he races. I don't think you
yeah.
can make him the number two driver.
He was still the number one driver against Ocon, and he was still
Yeah,
having argy bargy with him because sometimes
exactly.
he wanted to be ahead of him.
Yep, I
So
think you're
you
right.
can't do that, and it'll be weird to see Fernando Alonso in an Aston Martin because most drivers go to like some of these worst teams when their career's coming to end. I think Alonso's still got 4 years left in him, to be honest. He,
Wow, 4 years.
I do think he's got
Jeez.
4 years left in
I'm
him.
going to make a note of that. And in 4 years, we'll see
All
if
right,
he's still driving.
4 years, Fernando Alonso will be on the grid still.
They
I think. Yeah.
they struggled a bit last year, so this is another team with a big off
Eh,
season that needs to get some stuff together.
they struggled. Everyone says that. Like in the F1 game, they were the worst team with Williams, but they turned it around the last 5 or 6 races of the year. They really turned it
I'll
around.
give you that. Yeah,
Double
I
points
agree.
finishes
Yep,
consistently
yep.
from Vettel and Stroll. Vettel ended his career. We might never talk about Sebastian Vettel again on a podcast. He ended his career in style,
Yep.
finishing 10th, making Q3. No, that they turned it around.
Yeah, you're right. I will agree with you on that. I think it was the slow start more than anything
Yeah,
with them.
they went from second last to
Yep,
seventh and
yep.
equal sixth.
2023 goal, I'd say, is probably similar to Alfa Romeo, a top five finish. I think
Yeah,
that probably
I think
makes
so.
the most sense. If they could do that, that would be good. Let's
Yep,
move on. We got
yeah.
three teams to go. Let's move on to Haas, which is
Haas,
now called
Haas, MoneyGram,
MoneyGram
F1,
Haas. I think
MoneyGram
MoneyGram's
Haas.
first. Yeah.
Oh wow,
MoneyGram Haas
Haas,
F1 team.
MoneyGram
Um,
Haas F1.
Gunther Steiner back, even as a
Yep,
line of clothes. They've got Gunther Steiner t-shirts now.
really.
Yes,
Get
they
me
do.
one.
It
I'll
will
get
look
you
at it.
one.
And the driver, of course, Kevin Magnussen returns, and Hulkenbach, Nico Hulkenberg is back as the second driver for Haas.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I'm happy for Nico, but I'm really bummed out. I'm really bummed out for Mick Schumacher. I mean,
Yep,
it was great to have that name back on the grid. I didn't think he was bad. He was really good.
had some bad
And
luck.
I mean, I might not love him as much if his name was Mick Davis or some other last name,
Yep,
but yeah, I was really enjoying seeing a Schumacher back on the grid. Not that I saw Michael race, but
yep.
I really enjoyed watching Mick, and it's a bummer that he's not on the grid, but he could come back. He's still so young. Same with a couple other drivers. Nico Hulkenberg, though, the super sub,
Yeah,
Hulkenbach. He's there again, as he was with Racing Point in 2020, and he picked up a drive, did he not, this year? Or last year? No, he
I
did
think
this year.
he did. Yeah,
Yes, he did.
he
First two races in
he's
Aston Martin.
Yeah, he filled in and did really well. Look, he's a good, solid driver. Is he
Yeah.
exciting to have back on the grid? Maybe, maybe not. But
I want him to get a
look,
podium
yeah, he hasn't had
finally.
a podium. That's exactly right. Haas, and this is I wrote down a goal for Haas: more consistency, translate qualifying to race day. So they showed some really
Yeah.
great things, but
Great
then in the
qualifying.
races they often just kind of faded away and didn't really do much. So
Yeah, an example of that was Canada. I think they qualified like fifth and sixth or something, and they finished like I don't even know if they got points on.
happens so many times. I think they need to be
Yeah,
more consistent. They've got a chance here, as the American team to do some good things, get some American fans behind them, but they do need to be more consistent because look,
yeah.
Americans like winners, right? So we need some winning from Haas.
A
Um,
better example was Brazil. They took pole and didn't finish the race.
well, there was rain involved in that too. Taking
They
polls.
took pole. They
Well,
were first.
very questionable poll.
They were first.
Let's move on to
They
AlphaTauri.
started first.
Changes at AlphaTauri. Terrible 2022,
Oh
but
yeah, not good.
they've made some changes.
Yeah, that was a
Um,
bad,
new
bad
driver in.
year. Yes, Nick De Vries.
Mm,
Very exciting. He took over Alex Albon's position for the Italian Grand Prix. Did qualified in the top 10 in his first ever session in F1. Finished ninth, not 10th, ninth, ahead of Latifi. I mean, that's hard to do, but ahead of
oh yeah.
Latifi. It is, I'll miss
Mm.
him. But ahead of Latifi, um, and there were all those memes going around where Latifi, you'll be fired if you finish 12th and 20th in the championship, not if I'm 21st. But Nick De Vries was a very good driver, very handy driver. I enjoyed watching him in that Italian
Yep.
Grand Prix. I'm excited to see him a full-time driver against one of my favorites, Yuki Tsunoda, little man with a temper. I love him. Nick De Vries and Yuki Tsunoda, the two shortest drivers on the grid. Franz
Wow.
Tost, I believe, is the shortest team principal as well.
That's
So,
great. I didn't
hmm,
know that. That's
so
very
yeah,
funny. Yeah, I think it's a big year for Sonoda. I think Sonoda needs to deliver. I think there were times last year when I'm not sure if I were the boss, I'd bring him back. I don't know the money situation. I don't know the contract situation. I'm not saying he should have been fired, but I'm saying there were times last year when I felt like he wasn't bringing much. So I think this is a big year for him, to be honest. I think if he doesn't deliver this year, if DeVries outraces him, for example, I think Sonoda it's sayonara to Sonoda. That's my gut feeling at the moment. Um,
yes, and it's a second Dutch driver on the grid, might I
yes,
mention?
certainly is. And I'm gonna have to learn to spell his name. I just can't get it right. It's
Nick De Vries,
yeah,
Nyck.
Nyck. Yeah, very, very different for
Yeah,
me to spell.
yeah.
Do you got a goal
And it's
for
two
Alpha
words.
Tori?
De Vries is two
Yeah,
words.
there you go. Goal for Alpha Tori?
I do actually. As AlphaTauri, their best championship finish is seventh. As Toro Rosso, it's a bit better than that, sixth. So I think if they can match that with a
Yep.
sixth place finish, or
Okay.
even seventh to
Yep.
match AlphaTauri's best, sixth or seventh in the championship, I think they'll be happy.
Sounds good. Let's finish it off with Williams. Very emotional for you and for me. Nicholas Latifi is gone, but the American driver Logan Sargent is in.
Yeah, happy about that. But I'm really sad for my boy Go TV.
No more Gotifi gags.
No,
They're
I
gone.
will. When he's racing in Canadian Division 2, I will update you about
Yeah,
everything
well,
that happened.
when you do that podcast with your Canadian friend Ash, you can talk about Gotifi. But this is
I
a
will.
Gotifi free zone. In all seriousness, the good news of Logan Sargent. There are three races in the U.S. this year: Miami, Austin, and Las Vegas. That's going to bring a little bit more attention.
Yeah.
If Sargent can do well, that could be a dodgy proposition with Williams not being exactly
Oh,
the
yeah.
fastest team on the grid. But it is great to have an American driver.
Yeah, and the sport in USA has been growing and growing and growing ever
Yep.
since Drive to Survive. It's just millions of more people
Yep.
getting involved with it. I saw this YouTube video. It was like things that happened in 2022. And I was like something World Cup, F1 got really popular in USA. I was like, yeah, it did.
There you go.
It's huge there. 3 races now. Vegas. I'm super excited for Vegas.
Yep.
Hope no one has like a gambling problem before the race. But now
Gamble
a US
responsibly.
driver, yes,
Yep.
for the first time since 2015 when Alexander Rossi drove for 2 or 3 races,
Yep.
we will have a full-time US driver, and I'm excited for it.
And it should also mention there's a change at team principal. Yost
Yes,
Capito
Jos
has
Capito
left,
has
and
left.
has been no replacement named yet. So there
They're
still will be.
blowing through team
Yeah, it's
principals.
interesting.
Claire
There's some big
Williams.
changes.
There
Yeah,
was
I
that
know. You're right.
Simon,
Um,
whatever. Jos Capito. That's
I got a
three in
simple
three in
goal for
3 years.
Williams. Simple goal for Williams 2023. Don't finish last. Finish
Well,
higher than 10th. Get out of the cellar, however, whatever you want to call it.
yeah,
Um,
just get off the back row. Although
exactly right.
if we see new teams coming in 2024,
Yes.
Audi and what is it? Audi and Andretti, they
Andretti
might have a better
Cadillac.
chance to do that.
Yeah,
Andretti Cadillac.
Andretti wants a team, and the head of F1, the FIA, I forget his name, Sultan. I should know this. He's basically said that they want more teams. He's happy to have a ton of new teams, which I don't necessarily agree with, but
Nah,
you
I don't
know,
want it.
no,
I like 10. I like it. It's so simple. 20 drivers, 10 teams. It's so easy.
I do agree with that.
24 drivers.
You
It's
get a
so easy.
couple.
5 out
You,
in Q1, 5 out in Q2, 10 in Q3. 10 people get points. It's just so easy.
more teams equal more money. I will say that. So I think you're looking, I'd say a couple. You maybe do two. I think you can get away with two, but I'd sort of leave it at that.
24.
Um,
24 can work.
yeah, I agree.
22 is a weird number. 24 can work because you can take 6 out in Q1, you
Yep.
can take 6 out in Q2, and you could still have no, or you could take 7 in Q1, 7 Q2, 10 still in Q3. You could have 11 or 12 people get points. I think 24 would work okay.
Yep.
22 or 26, probably not.
All right. Well, that's a great way to come back. We got plenty more to come. I think looking forward, we've got some things. We'll do our rating of the liveries again, which we did, I think, on
Yes, we'll go through the
YouTube and
calendar.
Instagram. We're going to go through the calendar, and I also think we might toy with reviews of Drive to Survive. Watch an episode, review it, do a
Yeah,
short little review
why
or
not?
two, and then go from there. But anyway, it is great to be back. Sam, do you have anything else to add to this or not?
Nothing that I can
Yeah.
think of.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
it's good to be back. We've got our tickets for the Australian Grand Prix again, so
We
we're
do. We'll
excited
be
for that.
there.
We will
Yep.
be there delivering the news, breaking stories. Well, maybe not that. We'll see. Anyway, this has been the DRS Zone podcast. We are back. We are ready to roll in 2023. Happy New Year to everyone out there. Thank you for listening. You can find this anywhere you get your podcasts, and we will see you very soon with another DRS Zone podcast.